Hi again and welcome back to our Minecraft Origins Explained. Today we've got the 𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓴𝓼 origin, aka themed after Kratos from the God of War franchise. This origin is created by the user known as 𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓴𝓼 from the Origins Discord server, which you can go to down below. The 𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓴𝓼 is a 3-impact origin. You hate the gods, you must kill them as they are the true threat to humanity. Let's go into the abilities. First up, we have Raging Punches. Your punches are filled with rage, doing a lot more attack damage as well as setting your enemies on fire. So yeah, you get a nice little bit of an increase in actual damage, which isn't absolutely amazing. It still takes around 4 critical shots to kill something like a husk, but you also do have the bonus fire damage you also do on top of everything, which might make it easier to kill things that run away from you. Overall, the damage is nothing to really care too much about, honestly. Can't get defeated. Being defeated by the gods is a waste worse than death. Your will to live allows you more health and natural armor than the average person will. You have 20 total hearts as well as 7 armor points by default. Gifts of the God. After killing many gods and acquiring their powers, you have small buffs that include faster mining, reduced fall damage, and faster swim speed in water. So running through the bonus effects, you effectively have haste 1 permanently, which is your mining speed boost. You also take severely reduced fall damage, like falling 6 to 7 to 8 blocks will only take a single heart, even if it even makes it to that, as well as your swimming speed is drastically faster, probably the equivalent to about speed 2 in the water, nowhere near as fast as an average Dolphin's Grace, but this speed of your actual swimming speed increase, combining with Dolphin's Grace, does allow for some extreme super speed swimming. Curse of Ares. After killing the god Ares, flames surround you for the rest of eternity, but you also gain the weapon named Blades of Chaos. So the first part of this is that you just have permanent fire particles floating around you almost all the time, and secondly, you gain an iron sword called Blades of Chaos that has sharpness 5, looting 5, sweeping edge 3, unbreaking 10, and mending 10, oh, and also Curse of Vanishing for good measure. Whenever you die, this sword will completely disappear, and you'll have 2 swords when you respawn. Why do you have 2 swords? I suppose we'll find out soon. Blazing Spark. You can grind your swords together, leaving behind some sparks of flames. This has 2 levels. By attacking, you charge up the attack level, and when it's full, you can shoot an even more powerful version of it. So in order to use this ability as well as many of the other abilities that come with this origin, you will need to have 1 sword in your main hand and the other sword in your offhand. If you don't do this, none of these abilities will actually function as intended. So how this works is whenever you right click with both swords in your hand, you'll send out a bit of a fireball that lights about 1 to 2 blocks of fire, maybe even 3 if you're good enough with how you aim. But if you start swinging your sword and you'll see this white bar line up to the top, when it's at full charge and quickly right click, instead of sending your typical fireball, you'll send an explosive fireball that will do some explosive damage. This is on a separate cooldown to the initial fireball that you can also use when you have no cooldown on that swing, meaning you can use both type of fireballs in very quick succession, ultimately allowing you to deal a lot of damage. Keep in mind though, when you're swinging your sword, the white bar does backtrack a little bit every now and then, so you may want to watch it backtrack once, and when it gets back to the top again, immediately right click on that to get your explosive blast. Otherwise you'll just get the same old fireball. Next is Flaming Chains. Using the chains of your swords, you're able to bring in any target up close to you in sight. This can only be done if you're standing still. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned until now is this origin was originally made on 1.16.5. Now, most origin data packs translate over to the latest updates very, very well, just except for a few core abilities, mainly because there was a major rework in how a lot of the abilities and coding works with origins between 1.16.5 to 1.17. Now, so far, all the abilities I've talked about have worked perfectly fine in 1.19. This is the first ability that doesn't work quite as intended. What it's usually meant to do is have a flicker effect of flames and summons the mob towards you. It will also apply a brief wither effect. The brief wither effect still functions correctly as long as a mob's close enough to be affected by it, but beyond that the ability does not work as intended. So taking this to 1.16.5 for this ability, we can see how it works, how it's actually meant to function, by simply shooting out a bunch of flames and pulling in the mob, and then of course dealing an extra bit of damage and so on and so forth. So this is one thing to keep in mind. This is the first ability so far that doesn't work as intended on the latest version of Minecraft, and if you want this ability in particular, use 1.16.5. Next is Titan Smash, another primary ability. You can smash your blades on the ground, resulting in a huge explosion. However, it takes a lot of time to recharge. This is activated by holding your sneak key and then pressing the primary ability. Now, this is a very powerful ability and will probably work best in situations where you're surrounded by a huge horde of mobs, because what it does is it lets out a massive explosion that does enough damage to kill a mass majority of middle range mobs. Things like iron golems and bigger, more tankier mobs will survive this type of thing, but the weaker ones, the more squishier ones, will be immediately destroyed by this ability. This ability will also go through almost 3 layers of actual blocks, as well as having a pretty wide radius for around 10 to 15 blocks. Overall, this is an extremely powerful ability that does a lot of damage when you use it in the correct circumstances. But the biggest drawback of it has a cooldown of roughly 1 minute and 15 seconds, like over a minute of a cooldown in order to be able to use this ability again, which is definitely I would say warranted considering how powerful this ability actually is. Spartan Rage, secondary key. Your secondary key allows you to use your rage meter. The meter goes down really quickly, but in turn gives you really good buffs. Whenever you use this ability, you'll be gaining not only jump boosts, but you also get speed 3, resistance 2, and regeneration 5. Ultimately, some very useful buffs that all last for around 20 seconds, ultimately giving you an easy way to get out of any nightmarish situation that you might currently find yourself in. But here's where we come across our next little quirkiness with this data pack being put into 1.19. The bar doesn't seem to recharge quite as intended. What's meant to happen is the bar's meant to recharge slowly over time. Now that doesn't quite seem to work until I decide to go back to being a human and then move back into this origin again. Then suddenly the recharging actively worked again. So I don't know if that was just a weird quirkiness with an actual bug itself, or just an issue with this ability being ported from 1.16.5 to 1.19. But the recharge takes roughly a couple of minutes in order to go back to full to get this recovery ability back again. Ultimately, it could be pretty useful. Next, we have Spartan. You can't use any other weapon except for your blades. Those also include the long range bows and potions. You can also only wear armor up to iron. You also need to eat a lot more, and you cannot sleep whatsoever, meaning phantoms will become a nuisance quite quickly. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why don't I just upgrade to better weapons rather than just using the typical iron swords? And this is the reason why, because not only can you not use any form of bows or crossbows for their usabilities, but you'll also gain indefinite weakness whenever you're holding any form of weapon that isn't the usual swords that you spawn with. Then you have Banish. You are banished by the gods for your disobedience. This makes you a natural spawn in the underworld, aka the Nether, aka probably the worst spawn to have in a single player world. In a multiplayer world, it's definitely recoverable, it's a lot less annoying, but in a single player world, it's a lot more difficulty. And that's it for the origin. So what's your thoughts about this origin? Let me know in the comments down below. As I said, there are 2 abilities in this origin that don't quite function correctly on 1.19, but this origin is mostly almost entirely usable in 1.19, and it's quite a lot of fun. So make sure to leave a like on this video down below, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, as we're trying to get to 100k at some point in the future, and click this video on screen now for some more Origins goodness. Bye bye!